afternoon, everyone. So again, this is another blog lecture that I have prepared, especially for my social psychology class and for my social work student second year. Okay, so let's recall first. So the last time we discussed is about the nature of social psychology. Okay, so what about the nature of social psychology? We define social psychology as the scientific study of how our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are socially influenced, session na maiksi yung whiteboard, are socially influenced by a real or imagined presence of a person or group of people. Okay, so again, when we say social psychology, this is how our thoughts, feelings, behavior are socially influenced by a real or imagined presence of an individual or a group of people or a group of persons. Now, so the thing is with this is that let's first discuss again a real or imagined presence. When we say real, meaning to say this is an actual presence of a person or an individual. Kumbaga, nandyan talaga siya. Nasa tabi mo, nasa gilid mo, or kahit saan. When you say imagine, it is a mental context that somehow you just think of the person, but eventually it's still what? It still affects you. For example, let's talk about real. When, for example, literally when someone is observing you, let's say the person is beside you, behind you, or regardless of the location, di ba? There's a tendency for us that we tend to behave in a manner that is appropriate to that scenario or to that situation because you are being observed. Or at the same time, because being observed, when you're being observed, di ba, there's a tendency for you to double your effort or let's say gagalingan mo, mas gagalingan mo pa because you're being observed. In social psychology kasi, that is what we call social facilitation. Social facilitation. When you say social facilitation, your behavior is facilitated by an individual because you are directly being observed by the others. So somehow, diba? You tend to behave appropriately. You tend to behave accordingly because of that someone. When we say naman imagine, there's no actual present. Wala yung tao doon. Wala yung group of people doon. But still, it elicits a certain behavior, a certain feelings, or a thought process. For example, let's say you are in love with a person, then you're in a long distance relationship, diba? By just thinking or imagining him or her, diba? It elicits a certain feeling, diba? Kinikilig ka pa rin, diba? Na-arouse ka pa rin, parang ganon. Kasi nga, it's the person itself causes such thing, di ba? It still influence your behavior regardless if him or her is not there, di ba? Same with anger, di ba? By just thinking of the person na may galit ka, nagagalit ka, di ba? Kasi nga, that person actually elicits anger. So, like that, di ba? Kasi when you say social influence, when you say social influence, okay, we're talking about the effect of the word, the thoughts, the actions of other persons to us, di ba? Paano ba tayo naapektuhan nito mga bagay-bagay na to in their presence, di ba? Or in just imagining their presence, di ba? Kaya nga, in terms of social psychology, it's very important to study how these things adds to why we behave or why do we have a thinking like this, di ba? Kaya nga Kaya nga in social psychology, we tend to discuss three major factors or three major things. Okay, under social psych. Social psych. First is social thinking or social cognition. Then you have social influence. Then you have social relation. So these three things. Okay? So as I've said to the class before that this is how the course will be divided. So prelim, midterm, and final. Social thinking or social cognition. Then you have social influence for midterm. Then you have social relationship for finals. Okay? Now these three major things are some of the foundations of social science. And that's very important to remember. Okay, when we say social thinking or social cognition, this is how we form a perception, judgment, or view to three things. First is the self in a social context. How do you see yourself, diba? On a large scale. I'll discuss that later. That's the purpose of the video naman. Second is how do you see your society or the societal world itself? For example, the environment you see. How do you view it? How do you see it? And the last one is how do you see the universe or sorry, that's the universe. So sorry, the number three is how do you see others? Okay, your relationship to others, diba? How do you see people? How do you view people, diba? So that's social thinking. Now the thing is with social thinking can be influenced by social, societal context, diba? Kaya we have to discuss how powerful is society in terms of having this conception, having this perception, di ba? Kailangan talagang malaman natin how powerful is society, how powerful people are in terms of influencing the way we think, di ba? And the last one is social relationship. When we say social relationship, how do we form relationships to people, di ba? Are we more of the helping type of people? Are we more of the aggressive type of helping people? But the main thing is kasi yung nasa gitna. Okay? The social influence actually considers the two. How do you think? Depends on how you are influenced. How do you interact or how do you form relationship? It's depend on how were you influenced. So parang ganon, di ba? Kaya nga, it's a serious thing or it's a important thing to understand the three in terms of studying social psychology. Okay? So, we also discuss again the power of situation. Okay? We also discuss this, the power of situation. Uh, when we say power of situation, we tend to look at how situations affects not just behavior but also thoughts and feelings, di ba? Ganito yan, for example, example last time I've given in class is that uh, let's say you were in a restaurant, then you ordered something in the restaurant, then yung typical na restaurant that you have to sit and there's a waiter that would come in and take your order. Usually ganong setup, yung pangyayaman na yun, di ba? Then, what happened then is that as you take your order, syempre you were taking time, you were browsing the menu, di ba? Medyo matagal. May ganun talaga eh, because of the choosing part, yung pagpili. Then suddenly the waiter or the waitress acted a bit irritated and parang sinabi niya na, ah, Sir, ma'am, baka pwede nyo bilisan kasi marami pa akong customer. Hindi lang ikaw customer ko, nagmamadali rin ako. So may parang may ganon, di ba? Then sabi niya, parang galit pa siya, irritable siya habang sinasabi niya yun. So what's my point of saying such example? Tendency kasi, we tend to judge the person. We tend to attribute something to the person based only on personality. Diba? Mga ganong klaseng sitwasyon, sama ang judgment kagad natin is that impatient that the person is impatient, diba? The person is disrespectful. Ganun kagad ang tawag doon, ang ating judgment dun sa waiter or dun sa tao. Pero the thing is kasi we forget the power of situation. Somehow, we forget that baka may pinagdadaanan yung tao that day. Kaya somehow, ganun siya mag-react. Di ba? We forget to do that eh. We have this fundamental attributional error, sorry, na we always tend to focus on personality kagad. Meron kagad tayong attribution dun sa tao, but we forget to see how the situation works or how the situation affects the person, diba? In social psychology kasi, that's very important to look at. Especially, the situation of the individual are surrounded by the persons or surrounded by the group of persons, diba? For example, yung balkay do sa waiter, baka kasi kaya ganun yung waiter at that moment is that somehow, siguro, there was problem at home. There was a personal matter at home na he has to attend to, but he or she needs to work. Or somehow, siguro, nag-away sila ng boss niya during that time. Kaya somehow, sa'yo napasa. Diba? We forget that eh. Kaya nga, that is what I mean by the power of situation. Diba? You never forget or you never disregard somehow. Pero, we will look into that on the succeeding chapters. Pero, the value of that is very important talaga. Very, very important talaga. Kaya nga, let's avoid somehow judging an individual, right? As of the moment by based on labels kagad, diba? Based on personalities kagad. We have to look at the situation surrounding the person. Bakit kaya siya? For example, one good example is here, the virus right now. Our situation, our emergency crisis right now. Since we're in a quarantine or enhanced quarantine, di ba? Enhanced community quarantine. The situation somehow, di ba? Dito mo makikita yung iba't ibang ugali despite of the personality na meron ka. Lalabas at lalabas talaga, di ba? For example, you know the person as kind, patient, pero pa nakaramdam ng stress on a certain situation, may iba palang ugali, 'di ba? May iba palang reaction, may iba palang perception because of the certain situation, 'di ba? Or may makikita ka naman na ang personality niya talaga is violent, pero pagdating sa situation niya, it's an opposite side. He is the one helping. He is a selfless one, 'di ba? Siya yung tumutulong talaga sa kapwa. So somehow, uh, let's not box a certain judgment alone based on labels or personality. You have to look at situations. Okay. But regardless, that was just a recall. Recall lang naman yun. The purpose of the entire video is for another topic, which is again, social thinking. I'll start with social thinking or social cognition. Okay, I'll start here. So when the first thing that we need to know in terms of social thinking is the context of self. So how do we look at ourselves or how do we look oneself on a social context? Diba? How do we form this thing, diba, that we call as self in terms of a societal or in a big way on a social psychological context kasi, diba? So when we, in terms of discussing the self, so how do we think? How do we form cognition about the self, diba? It starts with the term self-concept. When we say self-concept, this is your overall. It's an overall. It's an overall schema or a belief that you personally attribute to oneself. Diba? So if you're gonna say or if you're gonna complete the sentence, I am, diba? Anyone, complete the sentence. Diba? Parang may kausap ako, diba? For example, I am an introvert. I am somehow understanding. I am partly patient, partly impatient. I am assertive, at the same time tactless. So I mean to say right now that is it's part of my self-concept. I think that would not be the overview, but that's part of the concept. Diba? Kasi when you say concept, that is your overall. Marami pa yan. So I'm just giving you some concept na meron ako about me. So how about you? If you have to complete the sentence I am, what would be your complete answer to the statement I am what? I am ganito, ganyan. It's up to you, diba? Now, the thing is with the self concept or to understand the self itself, we have to look at para saan ba ang self, di ba? Well, self-concept kasi is tend to change talaga or the self talaga is never constant. It tends to change as you grow old, as you become more mature. It always changes talaga, di ba? For example, let's say you were 9, uh, 10, 7 years old. Somehow the concept or the self is somehow concrete. Concrete yan. Concrete based on something that is more abstract right now. Ay, ewan ko sa inyo if it is more abstract. When you say concrete kasi, you tend to describe or have a self-concept based on physical traits, based on age, sex, di ba? Hobbies, mga ganon. Kaya if you're gonna ask someone, let's say 9, 10, 7 years old, they would typically answer you on physical characteristic. Eh. Ask them to describe themselves, they would answer how tall they are, what are their age, what do they like, what do they dislike, diba? Typically that would be their answer. But for example, at my age or let's say at your age, depending on your level of maturity, it's more abstract. Some of the answer is mas malalim, mas deep siya, diba? Or mas may dating, kumbaga, mas meaningful rather, mas meaningful yung, I'm not saying not meaningful yung sagot ng mga bata, but somehow it's still concrete kasi. It's somehow superficial compared to somehow as adults, diba? As old people would describe themselves. Kaya definitely it would change. So how about you right now? How do you describe yourself? Are you still describing it as concretely as now, or it is more meaningful, or it's more abstract? Something like that. Okay? Now, so why do we need to discuss the self? Kasi I have to discuss the self first before I could know what's your understanding of your society and at the same time, what's your understanding of other people. Yun muna. Mas maganda mag-start muna kasi tayo sa'yo. Diba? Bago palaki ng palaki. Diba? Kaya nga, I'll start with you first. What's your social thinking? How do you form this thinking about yourself? So actually, what's the usage of a self? Diba? I've discussed in other subjects, somehow, tao lang talaga ang has a sense of self. But the recent study kasi shows that animals also have sense of self. Uh, may mga studies na po kasi yun, pero typically it's still proven na tao pa rin talaga. Diba? So what's the function of the self? To understand the self, we have to know its purpose, its function. Bakit ba meron tayong self as of now? What's the usage of knowing who we are? Or what's the usage of knowing or completing the statement, I am? Actually, in social science, self has 4 functions. I think I can discuss 2 kasi the first one is too long, promise. It's too long. Okay? So the first function of the self is to have self-knowledge. The second function of the self is for self-control or for control. The second function of the self is for impression management. Impression management. And the last function of the self is to have this esteem, or we're talking about your self-esteem. Okay? Let's talk about self-knowledge. Brief lang. So, isa-isa natin yung 4. So, when we say self-knowledge, this is right now your evaluation, your understanding of your self-structure. Okay? How well do you know yourself ba? Okay, this is your self-knowledge. How well do you have an awareness or a perception of who you are as of now? When we say self-control, actually this is the executive, chief executive part of the self, meaning to say, how does yourself make a choice, plan, decide, diba? When we say impression management, this is how yourself, diba, uh, address oneself to the public. This is meaning to say how one want to be seen or to be recognized by other people. Kumbaga, impression nga, di ba? Anong gustong tingin mo ng ibang tao sa iyo? How well you maintain an impression, di ba? An outlook, a recognition about who you are towards other people. And the last one is self-esteem. When you self-esteem, this is your overall positive, okay, overall positive attributes, outlook, judgment, or perception sa sarili mo. Diba? It's a matter of, is it more positive or it is more negative? Kasi depende kasi sa self-knowledge. At the same time, depende sa self-control. Actually, kaya nahuli yung self-esteem is you have to look at 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, 3. Then you're gonna sum it up. Diba? Ano ngayon ang overall view mo? Is it positive or is it negative? So, sama yun yung brief. Pero for today, I think I'll discuss the two kung kakayanin. Then I'll have another part of the lecture for impression management and self-esteem. So, kaya pa? Sana kaya pa. Diba? Well, this is actually the purpose of the video, yung self-esteem. Baka matanggal yung aking whiteboard. Improvise lang yan. So, I like to thank Sir Aaron Pacada sa whiteboard na to. Pinaram niya lang sa akin. Yeah. Kasi you have to stay in the room. You have to stay at home. Diba? I cannot go to Star J or CMU to have like the last lecture na may malaking whiteboard sa likod ko. Pero right now, this is at home talaga. Sa bahay lang siya. Okay? So, let's start with self-knowledge. So when we say self-knowledge, this is your overall understanding or your overall examination of your self-structure. So how are you structured? Do you really understand yourself? The first and foremost thing that to have self-knowledge, dalawa siya. Dalawa, tatlo, I think. To have a self-knowledge, you have to do two things. First is you have to have introspection, or you have to do introspection. And the other one is you have to have a self-perception. Okay? Sorry, it's three. Forgot. Sorry. Okay. So you have to do three things. So first is you have to introspect. The second is you have to have, or you have to judge your self-perception. And the last one is, how do you view yourself or how do you know yourself based on others? So titingnan nyo, tatlo ang basihan natin in terms of understanding or having a self-knowledge. It's based on your introspection. Next is based on your self-perception. And it's how do we base oneself based on others. So let's start with introspection. Okay? So when you say introspection, this is common, especially to those who are listening to me or had my class in other subjects, especially psychology subjects. I think you remember what is introspection. When you say introspection, this is what? This is inward looking. Okay? This is inward looking. When you say inward looking, you tend to find inward information about your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Actually, as for William James, introspection is a difficult thing to do. Hindi siya madali. Hindi siya madaling gawin. Ang hirap niya. Diba? Kasi for example, when you say introspection, let's start with the question, do you really know who you are? That's the thing. Do you know the reasons? Yeah. Diba? Do you know the real reasons why you behave, why you feel, why you think in a certain manner? Diba? For example, let's examine one's emotion right now. Diba? What's your real reason why you feel that way? Ano ba talagang dahilan? Diba? Let's talk about behavior. Why do you have this passion? Why do you have these certain hobbies? Diba? Bakit ka merong ganito? Anong dahilan talaga? Thoughts, perception. Why do you have these thinking patterns? Diba? What's the real reason behind that? For you to answer my questions, you have to start introspecting. Ang bigat, di ba? Medyo mabigat eh. Kasi this is a real examination of who you are. Talagang you have to dig deep. Huhukay ka talaga para malaman mo kung sino ka talaga in a way. The thing is kasi, it's a examination of thoughts, feelings, behavior, motives, di ba? For certain for certain things. Why? Why do you do certain things? Why do you feel again and again yung mga bagay-bagay na to? And somehow, this is hidden from our awareness. This is not conscious. Talaga siya. Ang hirap niya. For example, kahit na lang, for example, parang pagkaintindihan tayo. When you say goal, definitely everyone has a goal. Tama. I have a goal. Okay? I have a goal to somehow be a future psychologist in the future, to have my own clinic. Okay? You have a goal to graduate. You have a goal to have work. Diba? You have a goal to have a family. Now, some people tend to equate or tend to connote when you say goal, it's an intention. Intention. But it's the other way around. Goal is not an intention. Hindi siya. Magkaiba siya. Kaya let's break the notion. Kaya may mga tanong, what's your intention? Somehow, ang sinasabi is, ang lumalabas, pag tinanong ko, what is your intention? Ang lumalabas, what is your goal? Pero, again, right now, let's have to have a different perspective on it. A goal is not an intention. A goal is not an intention because a goal is an out-tension. Magkaiba po ang intention sa out-tension. When you have an out-tension, you have a physical goal. But when you have intention, you're choosing to be conscious as of now. What do I mean? Medyo technical yung term ni Sir Santiago, pero what do I mean? When you say an out-tension, it focuses on the application of will, diba? Na you have to do this, you have to do that, and it leads to a physical goal. Okay? But when you say intention, it's the motivation. It's the motivation. Okay? It's the motivation. Kaya nga the thing is kasi with intention, when you, ulitin natin When you have an intention, you choose to have a goal. But when you have intention, you choose to be conscious or you choose to be aware. And that is where introspection comes in. Paano nangyari yon? Definitely right now, you have a goal. You have the same goal. We have all the same goal. But we have different intentions. You have different motivations about it. Diba? And the thing is kasi, you don't know the real motivation until and unless you are now conscious or you are now aware about it. But before you do that, you have to introspect. Diba? Kailangan mo na mag-inward looking. For example, right now you're watching my video. Diba? That's the goal. That's the intention, to watch the video. Pero I could not read, or you don't really know, I don't know about you. Pero hindi mo talaga alam what's your intention. What's your motivation in watching the blog or watching the blog lecture or the video? Diba? I don't know. So for you to find it out, for you to put it in the consciousness, you have to start introspecting kasi I don't know, I guess you don't know also what is the real reason, 'di ba? Now you have to do introspecting. Papasok ka ngayon. Pasok ka ngayon. Upo ka. Upo ka sa isang tabi. Magmuni-muni ka. Parang gano'n, di ba? You start doing that. To find the, for example, hindi naman tayo nasa classroom setting kasi. For example, why your goal is to finish class or your goal is to graduate. That's the goal. That's the intention. But within the intention, what is the real intention? What's the goal? What's the motivation that why you do it? To understand yourself, you have to introspect, diba? For example, why do you go to the gym? Why do you why do you why do you have these diets, 'di ba? Bakit ka nagda-diet? That's the intention. Pero what is the real intention? 'Di ba? Introspect. You have to introspect. Kasi results is not based on the intentions. Result is based on the intentions. If you want to get there, find the intention. Introspect. Diba? So the thing is with introspection, it's a hard thing. Doon pa lang sa example ko, it's a hard thing to do, but it could lead to benefits if you really know the things behind everything, diba? Diba? For example, I'm doing the blog, but you don't know my intentions. My intention is just to present the blog, diba? For class. Pero ano ba talagang intention ko, diba? I have to introspect it myself. Bakit ko ba ito ginagawa? Diba? Bakit ko ba ito ginagawa, diba? Is it for para hindi ako maghabol pagbalik? Is it for wala lang, gusto ko talaga magturo lang? Is it for knowledge purposes? I don't know. I to understand myself. I have to introspect. Diba? So let's talk about introspection. To have a good introspection, it starts with self-awareness. Okay? It starts with self-awareness. When we say self-awareness, under the theory of self-awareness theory, is that uh, when oneself, when oneself when oneself tends to focus on oneself. When a person, paulitin yung oneself, let me change. When a person tends to focus on oneself, then that could lead to self awareness. So there's to start with introspection. Sorry, excuse me. To start with introspection, you have to have first self awareness. Meaning to say, you have to focus on yourself. You have to focus on your thoughts. You have to focus on your feelings, and you have to focus on your behavior. Diba? Kasi for you to understand talaga kung bakit, you need to focus. Kung hindi ka magpo-focus, if your focus is other person, how would you tend to introspect? Ikaw muna. Sa'yo muna. Diba? So how does this goes? How does this goes? Self-awareness kasi is sorry. So how do we do self-awareness? Actually, self-awareness kasi is somehow done unconsciously or somehow it sprung out of the blue. Bigla na lang siyang lalabas. Bigla na lang siyang, ay, I'm doing self-awareness. For example, you're sitting in the CR. Usually, di ba? Ang tagal-tagal yung nauupo sa CR. Tapos, you're starting to ponder upon things. You're starting to think about things. Basically, that's how self-awareness starts and you're now doing introspection. Pero let's have a perspective here. For example, you look at the mirror. You look at the mirror or you see a picture, di ba? You see a picture na tawag doon, that was what? That was 10 years ago, 5 years ago, gano'n. When you start to look at the mirror, then definitely you start to think more about yourself. Then that's you have now cue for self awareness. May cue ka na. You have now this cue for self awareness, diba? Now, as you look at the mirror, you now start to be self aware. You now start to evaluate. You now start to examine yourself. Then you're gonna say, for example, nakatingin ka sa salamin, ay putang ina, ang pangit ko, di ba? Parang gano'n, di ba? Hindi ito yung gusto ko. Hindi ito yung gusto kong mangyari. Like, something like that. Okay? When you have those thoughts, as you ponder, as you look at the mirror, as you look at the picture, or are you sitting in the CR, di ba? That's the start of self-awareness. That's the start already of introspection. Nandun ka na eh. Now, the thing is now, you now start to evaluate. You now start to check. Kasi when you're doing self-awareness, you are now examining also, as you focus, you are now examining your current situation. You are now examining your current situation. You are now examining your current behaviors, perception, thoughts, feelings, versus your internal standards or values. This is the real purpose of the self-awareness. Diba? Okay, balik tayo sa mirror. Okay, you're looking at the mirror. Then, you start to say to yourself, hindi ako to eh. Hindi ito yung gusto ko, para may mali sa akin, di ba? Somehow it's more of a negative thoughts, negative feelings towards oneself, di ba? Then you start now to examine, is this my internal standard? Is this my internal values? Kumbaga lahat naman tayo kasi may tinatawag tayong ideal. Di ba? Lahat tayo may tinatawag tayong ideal self. Somehow when you say ideal, what do you want? What do you want as a person, or what do you want in yourself to become, di ba? For example, I want to be I want to be a psychologist, di ba? In the future, I want to be I'm a professor already, di ba? How about you, di ba? You have this idea, a good student, a good mother, a good father, a good parent, a good friend, have a career, be professional, di ba? We all have this ideal as of now. But the question is this ideal, is this value that we have right now, does it go against or does it match your current behavior? Di ba? Pag nag-match siya, then no problem. Pero pag hindi kasi, doon tayo magkakatalo. For example, you're looking in the mirror, then you're gonna say that, for example, I want to be a professional, pero I look in the mirror that parang wala nangyari sa buhay ko, parang I'm so stagnant, 'di ba? I feel like I'm an idiot, 'di ba? Parang wala akong nararating sa buhay, pero ito yung mga standards ko sa sarili ko. It doesn't match. Now, if the awareness or the evaluation, if the evaluation match, no problem. Everything's fine. Pero what if it's not a match? It doesn't match. It doesn't match. You have to have two choices now. Are you willing to accept the negative ones or the negative current behavior and willing to change? Or do you attempt to escape from it? run from it. Diba? Kaya naman yan eh. In terms of self, pag naging, kaya mabigat maging aware in terms of the self. Especially if you're now comparing an internal standard na itong bala ko sa buhay ko, ito dapat ako, 'di ba? Tapos on current situation, hindi siya tugma. Ang pangit, 'di ba? Kung tayo nagkakatalo, 'di ba? Are you willing to accept and change your behavior to match your ideals or your standards, or what? Are you gonna run from it or escape from it because you cannot accept, 'di ba, the negative things? Kaya nga, I still believe in the principles of what? By Carl Jung, if anyone recalls it. I still believe in the principles of opposites. Sa mga dati kong estudyante, when you say principles of opposites, as an individual, we tend to live on opposites. You're not always perfect, di ba? There are certain situations na may pangit talaga, may maganda, di ba? Mabait ka pero may masama ka ring ugali, di ba? But the thing is what I'm saying right now. If you are now aware of the other opposite, let's say the negative side na meron ka, and it doesn't match your ideal standards, your internal standards or your internal values, are you willing to accept this one or not? Diba? It's easier said than done, diba? Kasi yung iba talaga hindi kayang tanggapin na ganito nangyari, na ganito ako ngayon. Hindi kayang tanggapin. Kaya nga, escapism in terms of self-awareness can be deadly or can be harmful, diba? You're gonna what? You're gonna do certain things. For example, you're gonna be involved in vices, drugs, diba? Alcohol, smoking, just to what? Just to escape. Or you're gonna join people or groups na somehow accepts who you are as of the moment, would accept your negative as of the moment, diba? Then until mawala yung idea that you have to change for your own standard or for your own what? For your own sense of values, diba? But you have to introspect, diba? That's the hard thing with introspection. If it's all positive, no problem naman tayo. If it match, no problem, continue it. But the thing with accepting something that you started to become aware of a negative thing about you, or a negative perception, thoughts, negative behavior about you, are you now willing to change, diba? To match your ideal standard, diba? That's the hard thing about the human beings talaga, diba? That's a hard thing for us. Pero that's the value of introspection. Kasi when you start to introspect, diba, and you start to change a certain behavior, you always go for the right things, eh. Diba? Kasi gusto mong i-match yung ideal. Ang ideal naman kasi is always perfect, eh. Ideal is always perfect. Sound is always right. Kaya nga, you'll do the right thing, diba? You do the perfect thing just to achieve it. Kaya nga, you're guided somehow. You're guided kasi gusto mo maging ganito, gusto mo maging ganyan, you set standards, diba? Pero let's be cautious here, guys. The problem with setting an internal standard or values or ideal can also be harmful. Kaya nga somehow it's alright to put expectation on others, but now we're talking about expectation to oneself. Can you reach this? Diba? Can you attain this? Definitely there will be ups and downs. There will be crashes, there will be failures in accepting this. But the thing is with expectation is that don't expect too much. Even to yourself, even with other people. You don't expect too much. Somehow you need to limit your expectation. Meaning to say, I have internal standards, I have values, I have ideals, but at the same time, I know my limitations. I know my weakness, I know my strength, I know my capacity, I know my abilities in terms of these things. Diba? Then if you start to become aware, then you start to have self awareness about it using introspection. Definitely you can really know who you are as of now. So I think I have to stop the video for now. So as I recall, so we discussed social psychology, the nature of social psych as a recall. Then we discussed the power of situations. So the purpose of this is to discuss uh, the lecture about social thinking in terms of self. So I've discussed first in understanding self is under self knowledge. Then to understand or to have a self knowledge, you have to have introspection. Okay? I've done with introspection. So the next video that I will be presenting is for self perception. Then for understanding oneself by means of others. Then I will continue with social control, self-control, then impression management, then for what? Self-esteem. Okay? So again, recall na lang. Diba? Kasi the videos is running for already for 1 hour na. Ang bigat niya na naman i-post sa Facebook. Sorry po. So, shoutout sa mga barkada ko dyan nasa bahay. Okay, yung mga Kusunji, sila sa Pagata. Stay at home, Ebio, Sir Kites. Stay at home po, mga estudyante ko, stay at home ha. Walang gagala-gala. Okay. So again, let's recall, when you do introspection, okay, when you do introspection, you're doing inward looking. Okay. You're examining oneself, the reason for why you feel behave in ways, diba? And it starts with having self-awareness. When you do self-awareness, you tend to focus on oneself and you evaluate your current feelings, your current situations, your current behaviors, thoughts to your internal standards. Does it match, diba? If you now think it match, meaning to say it's no problem, but the question is why? The question is if it doesn't match. If your current feeling, if your current behavior, if your current thoughts, situation right now doesn't match your ideal standards, diba? Your value says, your internal something like that. Are you now willing to accept and willing to change certain things or certain behaviors, diba? Just to match it, or are you willing to escape from it, diba? If you see for example, if you see yourself in the future as professional, diba, or someone with a career, but right now your self-awareness is that you are lazy, you think of yourself as stupid, you think of yourself as weak, diba? I careless naman siguro in terms of introspection, you would understand. Siguro you'll find the reasons kung bakit ka ganon. Pero the thing is kasi, regardless of finding the reason why you are like that, diba? It's still the power of situation somehow. Kung bakit ka ganon, it's still a matter of choice. Are you willing to change? Diba? People think I'm stupid. People think I'm dumb. Somehow I would label also myself as stupid, as dumb. Then somehow it deficits or it goes against my ideal of in the future being professional. Regardless of the reason why you think you're dumb, it's still a choice. Would you accept it and change, prove to yourself, prove to others that you are not, and get to your ideal of being a professional, or, diba, would you escape it, diba? Sige, patunayan ko na lang sa inyo kung wala talaga akong kakwenta-kwenta. Sama na rin ako sa mga taong walang kakwenta-kwenta na kagaya ng ganito ako. Diba? somehow is acceptance is the key to somehow change in terms of having this self-awareness. So that's it. So I'm already running for 1 hour. 10 minutes na lang, 1 hour. So that would be the first part of this blog lecture for social psych. So I have two more, three more. Okay. So thank you. God bless everyone. Bye.